I was going to title this video from G.E.D. to Ph.D. and tell my own inspiring story, but then I started looking into what's happening today in education and in higher education, the dropout rates from high school, college, and grad school, and the more I looked, the more I was overwhelmed by the untold, ignored story of what's really happening today. And it's a story you need to hear. You see, there's something happening to give us hope. Hope if we're in the midst of a struggling high school or college or grad school career, especially hope for parents or guardians of those who are struggling in school and you just don't know what to do. Hi, my name's James Callahan and this is The Do-Over Show. Yeah, I'm that James Callahan, GED, BS, Masters, Ph.D., and it's, yes, the road less traveled. But along the way, from failure to success, my do-over involves some lessons that I've learned and some new things that are happening that are important for you to know today.
So how do we fix it? Let's talk solution.
Well, there's no cure for what you have? Oh my God!
The one area we don't get any help in is navigating the mess of a derailed educational career. The disappointment, the mistakes, the expensive mistakes we all face in our families and in our struggles to finish our degree, whatever degree it is we're trying to finish. Hey, very few people brag about being a dropout from anything, unless they're starting a cult. But if you are a dropout, or if you know them, you know they've got a chip on their shoulder. And that chip on their shoulder either gives them an excuse to be angry at everything, never to accomplish what it is they really, secretly, probably wish they could accomplish, and that is to finish their degree. And if you're one of those people, I bet you've memorized a complete list of famous, billionaire, rich people who never finished high school or college or dropped out of grad school, and you just can memorize them because they're the thing you memorized instead of the periodic table. Like Jim Carrey and Michael J. Fox, Nicolas Cage and Christine Applegate, Brandon Lee, Christian Slater, Lindsay Lohan, Richard Pryor for the old-timers, Cameron Diaz, Charlie Sheen, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and then there's that creepy guy, Bill Cosby. And you can Google it and find dozens of lists of famous people that dropped out of high school, college, or grad school. But here's what they don't tell you. The story of millions and millions and millions of dropouts that never make it to fame, never make it to riches, never make it beyond basic minimum wage or unskilled labor, never are seen or recognized as people who have great potential because they were told their whole life that they're not living up to their potential. They get ignored when applying for jobs, passed over for promotions, unless they've discovered the unicorn of a company that hires for experience. And even if they do, if they go up against someone who has finished a degree, they get passed over in favor of the promotion or hiring the person who not only has the experience or the skill set, but also finished their degree. Hey, and yes, the world is changing and fewer people are attending colleges and universities in the U.S., just by a little fraction. But most of the people doing the hiring, most of the people who actually hire for jobs and have a company or an organization big enough to pay you the kind of money that you think, you deserve, well, those are people that actually finished a degree, that went to grad school often. And they usually hire people to hire other people who went to college or grad school as well. And this leaves dropouts of all types, dropouts, to be ignored, underpaid, overlooked, and resign themselves to a life of missing out on every opportunity that everyone around them seems to get handed to them. Now, here are the numbers for the worst of us dropouts. People like me, who was a high school dropout. Every year, 1.2 million students drop out of high school in the U.S. That's a student every 26 seconds, or 7,000 a day. And here's one that really hurts. A high school dropout will earn about $200,000 less over their working lifetime than someone who just finishes their high school diploma, and will make $1 million less over their entire working lifetime than someone who finishes a college degree. Ouch. And if these numbers aren't enough to scare you straight into finishing your high school diploma, if you're not already living in the hell of dropout life today, trying to help your kid without knowing what's really going on, that's where the pain is today. So here's how to start digging yourself out of that hole, whether you're a dropout or whether you're a parent or guardian of someone who's just struggling with school. And the first rule is, if you're digging yourself into a hole, you gotta stop digging. I know it's pretty obvious, but realize this: there are alternatives to just sticking it out and staying in an almost impossible situation, or even a situation where the student or you just cannot see beyond dropping out. You can try homeschooling, you can switch schools, you can move. And I know families who've moved out of their neighborhood school, a dropout factory, to give their kid a chance to finish. Now, if you can't leave your kid at home and homeschooling is not an option, hey, it wasn't for me. My mom would have left me home for homeschooling. I would have screwed that up even worse, probably burnt the house down. Then the next step is, well, you got to let it happen. You got to drop out, realizing that it's not too late. It's just a detour. But that means that when you drop out, you don't just let them ride free and reward them for dropping out. No. They have to get a job and they have to start paying things like rent. Real life and adulthood come at you a little bit faster when you're one of those dropouts. Don't underwrite their dropout life. And I had to get a job and pay rent when I was 17 and living at home. When my mother finally gave up on teacher-parent conferences and interventions, and she looked at me and said, "You're done." But here's the thing, that choice to drop out is not irreversible. It's not a mistake that you can never undo. It's just a detour. But it sets you up for a more difficult life, a poorer life filled with more challenges than others. But hey, that's what you're signing up for with a dropout life. That's what I signed up for. Now, I didn't see it clearly at the time. Everyone told me life was going to be hard or harder for me than for anybody else if I just stuck it out. Here's the problem. I couldn't just stick it out. I wasn't ready. I wasn't able. I was the person who was always told, you're not living up to your potential. And by the way, there is nothing so discouraging and so maddening as to think you're motivating someone who's struggling by saying, you're not living up to your potential. Now, don't just think just because you get through high school and into college, it makes it any better. More than a third of colleges, if you combine all of them together, yeah, they don't finish and they end up dropping out. And did you know that almost one half, that's 50% for high school dropouts, almost one half of people who get into grad school, that's a pretty high bar, drop out of their graduate school program, never finish. Now, in education today, those dropouts, we're called non-traditional students, and there are more and more of us entering a lot of second career degree programs that colleges and universities offer to try to get a little bit of money from you, but to get you to finish your degree. Usually you've got a job and you've moved on, or you've hit a ceiling and you can never make any more because at your job they say, well, if you had a degree, you could get a promotion and you could make more, but you don't have that degree. They typically have a hardship, extreme poverty, a personal or family screw-up or tragedy, a learning disability or a challenge that went undiagnosed. Hey, when I was a kid and you struggled, you didn't get an IEP, you didn't get diagnosed with a learning disability, you were told that you were either a brat or lazy or a little bit of both.
You are just one big, beautiful, mixed drink of learning disabilities.
So I'm not dumb.
Boy, I was just playing when I said that earlier. No good teacher would ever call their students dumb.
Okay.
Not all dropout stories are the same, and not all dropout stories are equal. But they're usually about more than just someone struggling in school. Usually the struggling in school comes from a struggle elsewhere in their life.
Carrie, if you're not going to help me, then we're wasting our time. Explain to me what the stuff is. If I got a
Oh my God.
Okay, so imagine this. You do the hard work, you finish, you get into the college or university, your dream school, and you show up. And on the first day, to your first class, the professor stands up and says, congratulations, you're going to take this course from a high school dropout. Now, you probably look at them and say, dude, I didn't go to college. I didn't get into college, do all those essays, pay all that money just to be taught a college course by a high school dropout? Well, if you're one of the thousands of students who have taken a course with me in my 20 plus years of teaching in higher education, you've taken a course like that from a high school dropout. My story is pretty typical of people who are dropouts that went on and ended up finishing their Ph.D. Yeah, my father died when I was 11 years old, and I never liked school, and it just became a problem for me. But the problem wasn't necessarily school, at least at the time, that wasn't all that it was about. But eventually, when I got a chance, sort of a second career opportunity, I got a second bite at the apple, as they say, and I found a subject that I loved, and you couldn't stop me from studying. I went from hating school and dreading the idea of finishing any school to spending about 25 or 26 years as a student, total combined, and 20 plus years more teaching and helping people who are struggling, a lot of them struggle, to make it through a college or graduate program. Now, before the Department of Education revised the GED program, and different states have different rules about their program, in Illinois, where I was at the time, you had to wait for your graduating class that year to finish. And the week after that, I went to a local community college, sat in a classroom, took a preliminary test to see whether I qualified to take the GED, paid a small fee, went back the next day and sat for the GED. A couple weeks later, a big envelope from the Illinois Department of Education came in the mail, and my mom got it first, and she looked at me and said, "What's this?" And I said, "I don't know. The other day I took the GED, so it's probably my results." Opened it up, and there was my GED certificate. I display it when I have an office to display it. I display it alongside my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and my Ph.D. Yeah, there aren't a lot of people who can put all those things up on the wall. And here's the thing, I wouldn't recommend it. See, when the time was right, I got a chance at a non-traditional higher ed program. And when I got into it, I loved it. And I couldn't stop myself. So what I did was I crammed all the courses I could. Now, it wasn't a STEM program, so it's a humanities program. It made it a lot easier to sequence courses. And I crammed 4 years of higher ed, 120 semester hours, into just 3 years of time. I was newly married. I wasn't living on campus. I wasn't partying. And so that's what I did. That became my job. I worked in the summers. I saved my money. And then during the school year, I treated it as a job, and I finished my 4 years in 3. I was done with the idea that college is just the experience and living in the dorm. I had moved on from that, and there was nothing standing in the way except for me, and once in a while a professor who would say, "Slow down and enjoy your time." I was not there to enjoy my time. I was there to finish the degree and keep going to see how far I could go. Oh, and by the way, my mom was able to attend my bachelor's graduation, my master's graduation, and my Ph.D. graduation. Non-traditional students tend to also make non-traditional people and non-traditional employees, usually the kind of non-traditional employees that you want to hire. People who have learned the hardship and the knocks and the difficulty and the patience of doing something that somebody told them, "Nah, you're not good enough to finish this." They persevered, they pushed through it, they finished it. Maybe they have a little chip on their shoulder, but there's probably someone in your organization and in your company that does a better job than someone else because of the chip on their shoulder. And that's one big plus I've learned going from a GED to a PhD, is to learn that I can, if I dedicate myself to it, I can push through obstacles. I can learn new things. I can go beyond expectations, especially low expectations. And I can make something successful out of, well, what other people would call a failure, what I just call a detour. And I've had to work through the problem of thinking that if I just go to college and I finish it, somehow there'll be an automatic outcome. Here's the kicker. For a lot of people, there is an automatic upside for doing that. But it doesn't really help them for their lifetime, and they don't necessarily distinguish themselves. But you'll find in non-traditional students that have taken that detour, you'll find in them a lot more fight than people who think that they're entitled to it because they've received a degree like Daddy did. Now, this isn't one quick, easy 3-step advice about how to get through a program without dropping out, or how to parent or be a guardian to someone that's struggling, because sometimes you just got to let it happen and look for the alternatives. So that's on you to find out what the alternatives are. But here's the thing, when you're in the midst of doubting whether or not you're going to be able to finish it, and you're struggling with the idea of dropping out, the last thing that comes to mind is, oh, I have alternatives. The alternative is not to win the lottery. It's not to become an entrepreneur. It's not to become a gorgeous model or a superstar or an actor. What you see at the moment is, I just got to escape this and get out of it. Looking for alternatives takes the time and usually some change of scenery to look beyond the circumstances that tell you, oh, I cannot survive another day going to school. Hey, and a quick note to colleges and universities, not only are you getting more and more students who are non-traditional students, giving you more and more money from these non-traditional students, but that means that you got to be hiring, not just at the administrative level and not just on the janitorial or custodial staff. You need to be hiring people in higher education, running programs, teaching courses that are non-traditional students themselves. Hey, and thanks for being part of the Do-Over Show. Please hit the like button because it really helps. And while you're there, how about you subscribe and ring the notifications bell so you don't miss a next episode. I'm so glad you found me, and I found you. Thanks.